All right. So I am Beth Wooster. I'm the ESA Federal Programs Administrator. Um, Dottie is not able to be with us today, so we're going to have the rest of the team go ahead and introduce themselves. Thank you. Um, our agenda today is we are going to talk just a little bit about the UGP, then Title I, and all the parts of Title I. And then after we're done with Title I, if there are people that need some help just on their Title I part of the grant, we will offer some breakout sessions. Those that want to continue on with Title II, Title III, and Title IV will stay on. So we are going to kind of talk about several different pieces of it. I'm not going to read this slide to you, but just want you to know. All right, the Unified Grant Profile is the hub of everything that starts. And I think March or April, all of you had to submit your UGP because it was due before you could submit your first grant. This is the control center where you will update contacts. So if there was any changes in your district, you want to make sure that they get listed here. And if there's somebody that we should be contacting other than the superintendent when it comes to grants, maybe add them as a federal programs contact, or if you have someone that's specific to Title I or Title II, list them. That way we contact them and we don't always go to the superintendent. Otherwise, we'll be contacting the superintendent whenever we have questions on the grant. And to make changes, all you have to do is hit the amend button, make the changes, and then go to the submit button and submit to NDE. It doesn't have to be approved by us. It's automatically approved as soon as you submit. The next thing we wanted you to know is on each of the pages of the grant, there is a ESSA Canvas help link. And this is something, and the link is down below also. It's the https canvas.education.ne.gov. We're really lucky. Ann Hubble has created the different, thank you, all of the different sections. There is like the grant is broken up into little mini 2-minute videos. So if you have a question just on Title I or just on the UGP, you can go to that and watch the very short video on how to do that, and it might answer your questions. You're also more than happy to reach out to us, but this is a spot that if you can't get a hold of us, you might find some answers. So we wanted to make sure that you had this information. It's on every grant, so that's a good spot for you to look. It's right under the instructions. Now to get into the grant, if you have not already done so, you just go to the grant management system. I believe it's education or it's GMS. Let me look. It is nde.mtwgms.org. And there you will sign in with your email address and your password. The superintendent controls who has access to that within your district. Once you get in, you'll want to select the year. The year that we are in this year is going to be the 2026. So it's 25-26, but in our system, it's 2026. And then if you have not already created your application, down towards the bottom, you'll see the ESSA Consolidated 6201. And you just click the create button and then wait. It takes a few minutes for it to create the application, and then it will open right up. Once you get in there, you'll want to go to the allocations page. That's the second tab. And there you will see all of the allocations for your district. This example that we're showing you right here has Title I, Title II, and Title IV that are within the grant. Their Title III funds went to ESU 15. You can see the little in blue where it says 00-0015. That means that they are in the ESU 15 consortia. And so their Title III money is in that consortia. And so they will get support from the ESU for their Title III students. If you're wanting to transfer funds, You can transfer Title II to either Title I or Title IV, and you can transfer Title IV to either Title I or Title II. So in this example, they are transferring their Title II funds to Title I, and they're transferring their Title IV funds to Title I. So it's very simple. You'll just go and you have to transfer the full amount. You can't do partial. It's all or nothing. So that then shows the negative number in the Title II column at the very bottom and in the Title IV column. And it just adds those funds to Title I. And the funds then take on all of the characteristics of Title I at that point.
Okay, a little different voice now. So you've made some decisions. You have decided, you've got your grant open, you have decided what you're going to do with your allocations, and now you're going to move those tabs, go from left to right, where you're going to go over to the district goals and needs tab. And this is where it's probably the most time consuming. You've got to come up with some answers. Generally, we find our districts do hang on to answers from the year before. In this instance, we would like you to keep it simple. So the first question is basically like, how are you going to use your money? Well, we're going to use it to support our kids in the area of math and reading. We're going to use it for salary and benefits. And that's a good answer there. The next question is only applicable if you're a CSI, TSI, or ATSI school. You should know who, if that is you, to complete that next question. If you're not one of those schools, then in this instance, you'll just type in NA. We've given you a sample of how to complete that if you happen to be on one of those identified school lists. Basically, you're going to talk about how you're using those funds to support the kids in your school. Okay, the next part within the goals and needs page is deciding which title programs you're going to use. You'll see with the page that we have here that you click the button that's applicable to public. If you're going to take Title I money or Title I funds, you'll click under public, you'll click that button. And then the next question that comes up is if you have a non-public in your district, which funds will they be using? After you've clicked the button, let's say hypothetically you say that, hey, I'm going to take Title I funds, you'll get a box that it wants you to answer. It basically says, how will you be using the Title I funds? And here you'll be saying the name of your district will use the funds to pay for salary and benefits of our teacher, if that's the case, because we want to make sure that we're supporting the learners in our district. Now, this is kind of one of those odd situations, but if you work with ESU to provide Title I support, you have to add an additional statement in that box. It needs to say something like, we will also set aside funds for administration for ESU, whatever the ESU is, to support us and the students in our district. I don't believe there are very many of you that use that within Title I, but if you happen to be on here and you are one of those schools, you'll want to make sure that you add that statement, because if you don't add that statement, you'll hear from us and we'll likely send the grant back to you. Okay, so you've clicked your boxes, you've decided what you're going to do within public and non-public. If you have, and we talked a little bit about if you're using funds in non-public for, let's say, Title I, you'll talk about how you're going to use the allocations or the money in the non-public. If you're using it for Title II or Title IV, a statement for each of those title programs that you're using needs to go under non-public. The other thing, and this is one of those things that as we've all started reviewing grants so far for our districts that has caused some of them to go back, is you'll see this yellow highlighted area. It talks about if you happen to be a district that's moving funds from Title II and Title IV over to Title I, and you have a non-public in your district, you need to let the non-public know that you've transferred those funds. You can do that via a letter, via an email, but whatever you do, you'll have to hang on to that document, and then it has to be uploaded into this area of the goals and needs page under ESSA. I think I talked about the goal that they need to be specific. I'm looking at who's on here. I'm not sure that we have anybody that this is applicable to, but if you are a school that got an email from Rhonda Reed in June stating that you need a tribal consultation form filled out, this is where you will indicate, you'll mark yes on this box. And then there is another document that gets uploaded, and that is the tribal consultation form that Rhonda did send out to districts, and that also goes here in the grant. Those are two big areas that sometimes get your grant sent back to you. So if you haven't uploaded that, you have let your non-public know that you're moving funds, or you didn't include your tribal consultation, a lot of times those will be a couple of reasons why your grant gets returned to you. GEPA statement. So, US Ed does require on all federal grants that you have a GEPA statement. You have that on this grant. Within ESSA, there are 4 questions. All 4 need to be answered. NA or none is not an applicable answer or is not an appropriate answer, and it will get a one-way ticket back to you. The answers need to be specific to your ESSA funds. So within your ESSA dollars, if you're providing title support in the area of math and reading, one of the questions comes up on what are the barriers? And if that's the support you're providing, perhaps you're providing support to students in poverty that hadn't had some of those experiences, and so they're needing additional support in those academic areas. But it needs to be specific to how you're spending your ESSA dollars.
Okay, this next section, so that was the ESSA section of the grant, and now we are going to jump into the Title I-A section. So anytime you want to move throughout the grant to the different sections, the top right corner has a drop down, and in this case, we're going to take it to Title I. Now, the first tab that you will see once you click on the Title I is going to be your program information tab, page 1. And here you're just going to fill out the information for your district. So are you a targeted or a school-wide program? Are you both? And then just your grades served and the focus areas. Reading and sometimes math, but reading is usually included in all of them. Sometimes social emotional, but just your focus areas. The new thing this year is that we are, oh, go back one for me, sorry, Rhonda. The new thing for this year is that we are asking districts to put in the URL of where your school-wide plan can be found on your district website. We don't need the actual link to the school-wide plan itself. We just need to know where on the website we can find it. And so that is a new thing added in this year, is that we do need the URL to the website where we can access your school-wide plan. The next section asks if you have any non-publics, and then if you do, you would click yes. It will open up some boxes for you to fill out some information on the names of those schools, services being provided, the grade levels, etc. If you have a Title I program for a non-public. The very bottom of that page, if we go one more, is going to ask you about if you have a plan in place for when you get kids in foster care. And so at the bottom of this page, which is on our next slide, we will get what are you going to do when you get that letter from DHHS about kids who are in foster care? And so this is the same as last year. Feel free to borrow your answer from last year, or you can borrow this answer. And then at the very bottom of the page, we will click yes to a transportation plan specifically for kids who are in foster care, and talk about your best interest determination or your bid meeting. The next page is our program information, page 2. Now, this again is going to be a timely thing because this is where all the narratives are. This is where all the questions are, so that you get to answer. They are all the same. So again, if you'd like to use last year's answers to guide you through this, or just steal the answers from last year, they are all the same. Want to pay special note to question number 5. Which does state this is a requirement from US Ed, that if you were to have teachers that were ineffective, inexperienced, and out of field, what would your district do? We know a lot of you have amazing teachers in your districts, and you might not have any of these. You might not have an ineffective, inexperienced, or out of field teacher. But if you were to, what would be in place for them? Go ahead and borrow your answers from last year, because this was part of last year's plan as well. That'll take us to our targeting steps. So the targeting step 1 is where we're going to put in our information for our free and reduced numbers for your district. And so you could click the radio button number 1 or number 2. The majority of people will click radio button number 2. And then you just need to put in there what month you are receiving, or what month you got this data from. We need your lunch enrollment should come from a day between January 1st of this year and June 30th of this year. Once you put all those into the table, it will break it down by level. So if your district is broken down by high school, elementary, middle school levels, and then if you have multiple buildings. So we do need to know your resident kids for each level, your resident non-public kids for each level, and then your free and reduced, or your CEP numbers for each level, which are what goes in those red boxes there on the screen. Targeting step 2, you don't really have to do anything on this except click the proceed to ranking, because based on the numbers that you put in targeting step 1, it then puts it in this table on targeting step 2, and then you click proceed to ranking, which will take you to targeting step 3.
All right, and I'm going to take over on this slide. We wanted to just make sure on targeting step 3 that in order to select that top radio button, district resident students are less than 1,000. Your district has to be less than 1,000. So watch, there's a few districts that are hovering, and if you go over that 1,000, you can no longer use that ranking. So then the most common are either ranking within the entire district or ranking in similar grade spans. If you only have one school per grade span, you can do the second radio button. But you want to be very careful on these radio buttons, because that is going to make a big difference when it comes to rank and serve on the next page. On the targeting served schools, it's going to put the schools in order from the highest poverty at the top to the lowest poverty at the bottom. And if you have a school-wide building, it's already going to be checked. But if you don't have a school-wide building in your district, then you will need to select and check the boxes if they're a targeted Title I targeted building, or if you're not serving them. The big thing is you can't not serve them in order. Unless you're under 1,000 students, you can choose. If you're under 1,000 students, you can choose if you only want to serve the elementary or only serve the middle school. But once you get over the 1,000 students, then it becomes the rank and serve. So sometimes you'll have to play with the radio buttons on targeting step 3, because if you rank by grade spans or you rank by within an entire district, it can make a difference in this ranking on if you do or don't want to serve certain buildings. And then you'll hit the save button on this page. Targeting step 4, which is kind of the master key of the whole Title I grant. This is where you're going to match everything to. So when you get to targeting step 4, there are certain things that you'll need to do set-asides for, and then there's some optional ones. Administration is one of those optional ones. If you are contracting with an ESU to provide administrative services, some of them are having you put those funds under admin, and some are having you put those funds under coordination of services. Both of them are coordinating the grant. But that set aside would go right where this red arrow points. That's if you're in there. Or some of the really big districts, they have a whole team that they do set aside some admin funds for managing the grant. Another set aside is if you get McKinney fund, if you have McKinney-Vento grant, you would set aside the amount of money that you got, that you were awarded for your McKinney-Vento grant. That needs to match on what you were awarded. If you want to do more than that, then you would put the additional funds in the box right below, but you have to make sure that the amount that is budgeted for McKinney-Vento matches. Then everybody, except those that get McKinney-Vento grants, have to budget at least $100 under the homeless children and youth. A lot of districts say, well, we don't have anybody. You'd be surprised. But the other thing is, just in case you have someone that does show up, we want to make sure you have money there to help support that child. So this is a very important thing, and it is required that you do that minimum $100 set aside. If you are a district that takes indirect costs, you would put the amount that's in the budget in this box that the arrow is pointing at. So you would put the total, and then if you have non-public and public, it will split it proportionally between the public portion and the non-public portion. Just wanted you to be aware, there are not a lot of districts that take indirect costs, but if you are one of them, that is the box where it goes. And then even less likely is that if you have a non-public that they have carryover. With Title I, it's very specific. They want you to use the funds within the year they're awarded, but sometimes there might be an extenuating circumstance. For example, maybe you couldn't hire a teacher to provide Title I services to that non-public. Well, that's not the non-public's fault. That would be an extenuating circumstance. So the funds that they had from the previous year or the portion that weren't used would be put in the carryover for the non-public. And this is just where that amount would go. All right, then after the set-asides, there is the bottom section. After you've filled out all of your set-asides, if you click that calculate button, it's the first button you want to click, it'll calculate what's left to be distributed. And then most often, if you click the distribute amounts evenly, it will distribute the amounts between the buildings that you're serving. The big thing here is that rank and serve. You can't fund a school with higher poverty with a less per pupil. So in this example, the higher school, the school with the higher poverty was 68.66. It ended up having $1 more per pupil than the other building. That's just the way it worked to get that $0 difference, but it can't be reversed. It won't let you put the higher amount at the less poverty school. Even if that school is a bigger school, it all goes on the poverty with Title I. The other thing is if you're not serving schools that qualify, for this example, the high school and middle school qualified for Title I, then you have to put a note in the comments box down below. Otherwise, it won't let you save the page. Lots of times, the reason it won't let you save the page is because you didn't put a comment of why you're not serving those schools. It could be something as simple as we chose to serve the elementary because that's where we get the most bang for our buck, or MTSS team decided that the K3 level to improve student fluency in reading was where you wanted to focus. Just whatever the reason is, you need to have something in that box in order to save the page. All right, the last box is the set aside narratives for the targeting steps. So you will have to put a comment for either if you have the McKinney-Vento funds, or if you're using just the $100 homeless, you will need to have something stated in that set aside. If you're doing any other set asides, you also would need to put a comment. So for this example, they had ESU 10 providing some administrative services. So since they selected admin in the set asides, they need to put a comment. So this example would be so much money was set aside for the administrative costs for contracting the support through ESU 10. Just something to explain what you're doing with those set aside funds.
Okay, and that'll take us to our next tab, which is the staff tab. Now, this is something that we do get pretty picky on because there's lots of things that need to match when it comes to time and efforts, percentages in SSRS, and your payroll. So this is what the page looks like that you would fill out for your staff. If you go to the next page, we will show you that on our website, we now have this new spreadsheet template that will help you determine your percentages that you will need for NSSRS, your time and efforts, your payroll, and for the grant. So it can be found on our website under forms. And then off to the right is just what it looks like. So it tells you the purpose, gives you a couple notes, and then the calculator. Rhonda just put the link to it in our chat. So once you get this, we will go to the next page. We kind of broke it down into an example for you. Oh, sorry, Rhonda, one more. What you need for this is whomever you're paying, you need their total base salary without any extracurriculars. You need the total base salary. That's going to go in where the number 1 is. You need the total benefits package for that staff member. That goes in box number 2. Then the grant award, or how much you have after all of your set asides left in the grant to pay for your salary and benefits. So you only need to put in 3 numbers into this grant: the employee salary, the employee benefits, and how much you have in the grant to spend on staffing. This worksheet will do the rest. So once you put that in there, it'll automatically spit out to you what their effort percentage is, what their eligible salary is, and what their eligible benefits are. So you will need, as you can see in the example here, the 83.2% is the effort percentage. That is what you would put in SSRS. That is what you would put on the staffing page if you fill that out. That is what you are going to put on your time and effort, your Title I teacher's time and effort logs, and it is what you will need your payroll to match up to, all to that same percent. And we always go to the whole number. So this one would be 83%. Then below that, it tells you exactly what you need to put on the 100s on your budget page and exactly what you need to put on the 200s of your budget page. We have found this has been very helpful so far this year for people completing the staff page and just their budget page of knowing what is comparable. Because remember, in Title I, if you spend 83% on salary, you have to spend 83%. You have to pay for 83% of the benefits as well. And so this just kind of does all the work for you. And you don't need to do anything. You just need to make sure that they all match. NSSRS, time and efforts, the grant, and payroll. And then this one just kind of lays out, this is the percentage is what goes on your T&Es. The staff reporting window is open. I know a lot of people, we do have NSSRS done. It's still in that audit window. You have till the end of the month to make, well, you can make changes anytime, but you have till the end of the month to make sure that it's all correct and accurate. And then we will be matching that up when we look at your grant. The last tab that we really talk about in this is the budget tab. Now on this, everyone who fills out the grant has to have 2 things on here. You have to have your set aside for your homeless, and then you have to have your program, whether it be school-wide or targeted. Okay, the $100 set aside is a requirement for Nebraska that you have, that's the minimum. So that's 06 homeless, and that $100 you can just put in supplies. Then if you're school-wide or targeted, doesn't matter, but you would need to put in the amount you're going to pay out of the grant for salaries, the 100s and the amount you're going to pay out of the benefits with the 200s, and that comes directly off that template that we just went over. So you can ensure that those numbers would be right and match up to the grant's total. The goal is to have a 0 at the bottom right corner once it's all said and done. Before you submit, here are just some checklists or some things just to make sure that you have done. It's kind of a review of everything that we've gone over, making sure you have yes to your transportation plan, make sure you have fully answered question 5, that $100 targeting in the right spot on targeting step 4 for the homeless, and that you have it on your budget page. And that if you are a school-wide program, you have selected the school-wide function code. And if you are a targeted program, you do select the targeted function code. The other things that you really want to remember is that written communication with your non-publics is located on the ESSA section of the grant. And that if you are a targeted assistance school, you must have the staff page filled out. If you have non-publics, not all non-publics are targeted. So if whomever the teacher is that's working with the non-public or goes over to the non-public or you contract through the non-public, their name also has to be on the staff page. Rhonda also just put in the application submission checklist is just another thing for you to make sure as you're going through your grant to make sure that you dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's. So thank you, Rhonda, for putting that in the chat. And so that will take us kind of to the end of the Title 1A section of the grant. Just a reminder that the grants are due at the end of the month. So thank you very much. If you are a Title I only, if you guys only take Title I and you would like to move into a breakout room with myself or another member of the team, let us know. Rhonda is going to open up our breakout rooms.
Also, go ahead, Ann.
Nope, go ahead. I was just going to say, so if you know who your reviewer is and you want to go into a breakout room, I know I will go into one. Even if I'm not your reviewer and you have any Title I questions, please feel free to go into a breakout room.
Yeah, Michelle has posted she'd like one, and she'd asked a question earlier. She's our 2 districts that consolidated into 1 district. So she had questions about that targeting step and where to pull the data from. So who would be a good person for her? So Beth would be a good person, Michelle, for you to join in her breakout room.
I will head there.
And I'm going to help Missy with a reimbursement request question. She had reached out to me prior to this. So.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, and Justin, I can go into a breakout. If you want to go into my breakout room, we can work on your grant.
And as we get ready to do the rest of the programs, Title II, 3, and 4, just a reminder for all our programs, including Title I, these are supplemental to your local and state dollars. We always like to remind people these are above and beyond what you're already doing with local and state funds. And then with Title III, EL, and IE, those are even supplemental to other title funds such as Title II and Title IV as well. So we really have to make sure we're supplementing our programs with these federal dollars. So we'll go ahead now and start with Title II. And as you can see on the screen, we're showing you where you go, that drop-down box, similar to what Ann shared with under Title I. You go up that top right corner, you drop down to the Title IIA section. And then you would go on, and that will get you the different tabs across. And on these, we're just going to talk about some new things or some things we really want to remind people on. We're not going to go through each question in each section. But on the program information page for Title II, that first question is one of the main questions because it helps us look at the rest of your Title II grant and have a good idea of what you plan on doing with that. So the question we ask is, we want you to describe your Title II funds and how you're going to use them and how you decided this was the way you were going to use them. So that will give us an overall view of how you're going to use these funds. So when we look at your uses and we look at your budget, we'll have a good idea of what we should expect. So this page is for all of our remaining title programs. We're talking about titles 2, 3, and 4. If you have carryover funds, which those may not be showing up in your grant right now because you haven't done your last reimbursement request or haven't received that yet, but if you don't have them yet, they will be coming. What we need you to do is make sure that you make a comment about if there is any non-public carryover for titles 2, 3, or 4. And we've got a couple examples. We don't need a lot of information. We just, if there's no carryover, kind of like that first example, just when we go, and we'll show you where this goes here shortly, but go to the ESSA consolidated page and just put a comment in, no carryover for the 24-25 year goes to the non-public. Or if there happens to be some carryover, put a comment like the second one, $4,870 of carryover from the 24-25 year goes to the non-public. And as we go to the next slide, you'll see an example of how this could be done. So in this case, this public school has a St. John's private school in their district, and they did not have carryover from last year, the 24-25 year. So they just made that brief, quick comment, no carryover from the 24-25 year, and that helps us know that we don't need to double check that you've identified it on the ESSA page and on your non-public participation page, which we'll be looking at here shortly. So here is an example of our Title II non-public participation page. Our Title III and Title IV look very similar to this as well. But we're pointing out those highlighted lines, line number 5 and line number 11, because this is where that amount of carryover will be placed if you have it for the non-public school. You would use line 5 if it's reason C, or line 11 if it's reason A or B. And if you're not sure what those three reasons are, if you look at the end of line 5, we have a hyperlink for reasons for carryover. And that hyperlink will take you to all three of those reasons. So you can read that and determine which reason it would fall under, A, B, or C, and you'd put your non-public carryover in that line. So on our next slide, we're going to go on to the staff page. And much like we talked about earlier on the Title I staff page, the staff pages on 2, 3, and 4 are very similar to that. And the key we always want to point out is that total at the bottom for both the instructional and the non-instructional pages must be equal to what you're paying in salary on the budget page. So when we're reviewing this, we're going to look at both of these pages. If you have numbers in both, we'll add them together, and it must equal the salary on the budget page. So this is just a reminder of things you can look for to make sure everything's going to work, so we don't have to send this back if at all possible. So now here we're looking at the budget page of Title II. So this district does have a non-public school. So what you'll see is in the top part, they've done the drop-down box. They're just spending their public dollars for professional development. So it's drop down code 12, and they've coded it over in 4, 5, 800 other purchase services, and they have their amount there. Now for the non-public, they're also using it for professional development to provide services to their non-public schools. And so for that drop-down box on the non-public part, it would be code 2 for professional development non-public. And then there they have it coded in the 300 column for that 8,598. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Ann for our Title III section.
And I'm going to talk about the first part for Title III EL. And you can see there is the picture of the grant here. And once again, in the circled in the upper right-hand corner, you would click on the Title III EL portion of the grant. And once you clicked on that, then you would get into the Title III EL grant. And it runs across as the other grants do with the tabs that go from the right to the left. The thing that's a little bit different about the Title III EL grant is that it does spell out that you need to budget your areas in three ways. One is the LIEP, or the language instruction model that you use. One is for professional development, and one is for family and community activities. On let's see, on this one right here, yeah, that it's the three areas where you need to budget. Okay, now if you can go to the next one. The next question, so once again, they go from right to left. So the first one was guidance. This tab happens to be program information. On this program information tab, you need to mark at least one way that your district provides instructional services. So is it a transitional bilingual? Is it a dual language or two-way or ESL, content classes, or a newcomer? You might have three that you marked there, which would be fine as long as that's what you're doing in your district. But the point here is that you have to mark at least one, and then make sure you're marking the programs that your district is offering for EL students. The next tab, or the next slide. Once again, this is still on program information. This is, the program does ask you though that you have to have support of the LIEP marked, professional development marked, and provide parent and community engagements marked. So those first three have to be marked. And then if there's any other way that you want to use your funds or provide for the students or the parents in your district, then you could mark those other ones. But they're the three that have to be marked are the top three under program information. Next page.
We've got the link in the bottom right hand of the page.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I wanted to draw your attention to here is that when you are on the budget page, the three areas where you have to have money budgeted for are the function code 02, which is instruction public, which would be an example of your LIEP, and then 09, which is the family and community engagement, and then also function code 10, which is professional development. So on the budget page, all of those would need to have some money allocated to them. I had an example of a school district who had turned in their grant last year, had all three of those areas budgeted, and then when they sent in an amendment, they had taken money out of two of those areas and put it in one. So I had to send it back because it has to have money coded under all three. And then the next one will be Title III IE, and Anne is going to talk about that one.
Yeah, so this is just a smaller sub-grant of the Title III, and it's, again, a very small population of students. There's a definition there that kind of lets you know, again, they're students that can be aged from 3 to 21. They were born in, they were not born in any state of the United States, and they have not been attending any schools in the States for more than 3 years. And there are ways that you can do that coding in your student information system. And we do have some reports and advisor to help you, so to make sure you're truly identifying those immigrant students. And then you can see some of the activities that are options that you can do. They just need to focus on the immigrant student. So that would be something you just, whatever you do, it's for that specific population of students. And then in order to receive this sub-grant, a district needs at least 10 students who are identified as the immigrant students 5% increase over the previous 2 years average, and a minimum of $5,000 to receive the grant. And I know that some districts get it 1 year and then they might not get it the next year. And so we just try to do the best to help you with that. And then across the grant are all the other things, the non-public participation, if you have any staff, any equipment or assets, and then the budget. So again, this, and then if you have any non-public students that would qualify, you would make sure you code those correctly on the budget page. That's it.
So now we're going to finish up with our last program that we're talking about today, our Title 4A program. And so as we go, like we showed on these other programs, you go that top right consolidate application drop-down box, and you would click on Title 4A, and that would take you to the page with all of our tabs. And the first one we're going to talk about is the Program Information tab. So we're going to talk about questions 2 and 3, because each district has to fill out one of these 2 questions. And so that's why we have those 2 areas highlighted in green. So on question 2, districts with an allocation of less than 30,000 may answer NA. So question 2 only needs to be answered by those that receive $10,000 or more in Title 4A. And it's the other way around for question 3. Districts with an allocation of more than 30,000 can mark NA for question 3, and the rest of the districts need to answer that question. So as we go to the next slide, this is where we have a big change on our Title 4A section. We added a question last year, and we did not get the responses we were needing to fill out some public reports that we're required to fill out for the United States Department of Education. So we've gotten very specific this year and going forward on these. So questions 4, 5, and 6 are all asking the same question, just for the 3 different areas that fall under Title 4A. We have well-rounded, which we'll talk about in question 4, safe and healthy schools in question 5, and effective use of technology in question 6. So our districts with more than $30,000 have to spend 20% or more in safe and healthy, 20% more in well-rounded, and something in effective use. So those districts will have to have at least one SMART goal in each of these areas, because that's a minimum requirement. If a district chooses to do more, that's fine, but we're only requiring you to do one SMART goal that goes with how you're spending some of your funds. Now for our districts less than 10,000, you only have to have a SMART goal for the area where you are spending funds. Some of our districts under 10,000 only spend in one area. That's fine. You'd have to have a SMART goal for that area. If a district spends in 2 areas, they'd have to have a goal in both areas. Or if a district under 10,000 chooses to serve in all 3 areas, you would need a SMART goal for each area. So one reminder on that too is sometimes we may have a district with less than 10,000 that has a non-public. So if your public's using it and well-rounded, you need a SMART goal for that. But let's say the non-public's using it in safe and healthy, you would need a SMART goal for that. So this is for the total amount of money. It's not divided up on these 3 questions by public and private. These goals will eventually be published in a public document. The second part of that document will include that last little thing on the blue boxes. Next year, on top of having these questions for next year, you'll come back, refer to these questions, and then you'll rate them on the success of the district of meeting that goal. It'll be a Likert scale, probably from 1 to 5, starting with unsuccessful in reaching that goal to very successful. This is a self-evaluation. The only good answers on this will be the honest answers. If you are unsuccessful or you're not getting there, or you're just slightly successful, we want you to mark that, because there's nothing that's going to be held against you. Some people worry if we mark ourselves down, that's a bad thing. No, it just means you need to continue to work on it. Maybe you need some assistance from NDE. Maybe you need to change your goal. So there's nothing wrong with that. Also, on the other end, if you mark, say, a 5 that's very successful, The only thing that might happen is we might reach out to you just for more information, because a lot of times we get other districts asking questions of what have districts done that's been successful, or what are some districts who've been successful in these type of activities. So that is what that Likert scale will be. It'll be evaluation of these goals from this year. So those will be 3 additional questions you'll see next year, and you'll just be answering a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So that's the big change for Title IV. So we'll go on to the next page, which are our allowable uses page. This one, we have some questions every now and then because of those 3 areas that are highlighted and circled. At the top of the page in that Title IV-A allocation, this will be your allocation for the 25-26 school year plus any reallocation funds, because that's all we need information for on this specific page. So let's say you had the $10,000 and in reallocation you had 100. So you now have $10,100. The 2 circles on the right need to equal $10,100 because we're only asking about this year's money. If you have carryover from the previous year, it will not show in that top box, and we don't need you to divvy it out in the 3 areas this year because you've already done that on the prior year's grant. So this will only be for the new money that you're getting for the 25-26 year, including your reallocation. So as we go to the next page here, it is the allowable uses in each section. So here we're showing your 3 sections: the well-rounded, safe, and healthy students, and the effective use of technology. For each area that you are spending funds on, so for our districts with 30,000 or more, that will be all 3 areas. Under 30,000 could be 1, 2, or all 3. We will need to see at least 1 check mark for each area that you are funding money. So these are the ones that apply to you. For our smaller districts, which is the majority of ours get under 30,000, we might only see 1 or 2 check marks in each section that you're funding because there's not a lot you can do. Some of our bigger districts is where we start seeing more of these boxes checked. And we look at this and compare it to what you said you're spending in allowable uses in your program information page to make sure everything's making sense together. So as we go to the next slide, we're going to see another non-public participation page, very similar to what you've seen in the previous programs. And again, on this, we're just pointing out those lines 5 and 11 for the non-public carryover. So again, if you have those, make a comment, whether it's 0 or there's an amount on your ESSA consolidated page. And then on here, put your funding in either line 5 or 11 based on reasons A, B, and C. So as we go to the next page, the operational equipment appears on all of our sections. We typically don't see it a whole lot, but when it does, we want to point this out. These items here highlighted in blue could fall under operational equipment. A lot of times you're going to see lower cost like computers, iPads, stuff like that are less than $10,000, but they meet some of these 6 requirements. You'll need to put the location of where they're located, the cost per unit, and then the quantity. And then the calculated total cost is done by the system itself when you save those. Then the next page, we go to capital assets. We seldom see this, but on a rare occasion we do. This is those equipment pieces that are $10,000 or more. And again, we encourage people to read what's highlighted in blue and the different pieces of this. Again, you'll have the location, the unit cost, the quantity, and the system will figure out that total for you if the unit cost is more than 1. And the key on this we like to point out is the number here must match what's in the 700s on your budget page. So with that, we're going to go on to our Title IV budget page. And what you'll see is on the top part, this is a smaller district with less than 10,000. So they are only funding under well-rounded for public. So they have some funds in 4, 5, 600 for well-rounded, which is drop-down box 02. There's also a drop-down box for safe and healthy and a drop-down box for effective use of technology. When you get down to the second part of the budget for the non-public schools, you'll use the one non-public equitable services. So there's only one drop-down box for our private schools. And then you'll need to make sure the amount that totals, and in this case, it's all in 300 professional development, that matches the non-public page from your allowable uses page. So those two numbers will have to match on your original application. If you happen to have carryover for the non-public, this will not match with your allowable uses page, but will match with your public non-participation page. So I know that can get somewhat complicated when we're talking about carryover with non-public schools, but if you ever have questions with that, feel free to work with your consultant. Feel free to reach out to me and we can help you with that. So that's going to conclude Title IV. I know we've had a couple questions over some of these in general. So as we finish up here, we just want to point out on this slide, we have all of our consultants that review grants, their ESUs that they serve, their emails and phone numbers. Feel free to reach out to us with questions, or if there's something you would like us to check on, and you think your grant's ready and you want us to give it a check before you submit it, feel free. We also have Beth's contact, because after we review it, she'll do a final review of them. Also, feel free if you have questions to reach out to our other team members, Janice, Rhonda, they're both very helpful too. So we want you to reach out when you have questions, and these are our contacts. And then we'll just go to our last slide as just reminders to applications are due September 30th. And like we've said throughout, please reach out to us with any questions you may have. So we'll open it up at this point for questions from people that are still left.